Yes, this is Lee's Day. To start this special celebration of life with all of you caring and loving people of my dad, I thought it would be best and most appropriate to start at the beginning. Way at the beginning. Lee told my wife Tina and me his favorite memories, and I wrote them up in a short story, and I would like to read that to you. He awoke early, a boy, energized. He padded softly, art memories. Dad prepared space, art paper, paints, brushes. No one stirred. He worked, focused, like Dad. No time, only task. I'm done. His white shirt was streaked with colors, movement, a presence. He giggled, looked up at Dad and said, "Look, I'm a rainbow." That's his first memory. He was skilled, asked to design school posters. He discovered the valley with Dad, sending drawings of it to his sweetheart. Soon they worked in Forest Knolls at Forest Farm Summer Camp. They rode the ridges on horseback. He was the horse wrangler and dreamed of living there. He fathered a son, moved to the valley, and the three explored all the trails. Soon the community center was filled with his art. And I think this rain, Lee had something to do with this rain, because we are now surrounded by his artwork. We're not out in the patio. So I think he had a plan. So soon the community center was filled with his art shows, then a sabbatical, a whole semester off to study art. He packed the travel and headed for the southwest, Four Corners, petroglyphs. He discovered a solar-lunar calendar atop the Hollow Butte in Chaco Canyon. A quick call home. Gene got the next flight. They climbed together, inspired, full of life, higher and higher. Ancient native ruins far below. This was their time. Early morning, time of prayer. They felt the native in themselves. They walked in the footsteps of the ancestors. 3 slabs of rock leaned against the cliff, perfectly placed. First light beamed through the slabs. 2 light beams embraced a giant petroglyph spiral inside. Summer solstice. Inspired, he said, "I must create these desert-colored patterns on my art paper, so I can work on such surfaces too." So from this came his prepared paper that you will see all around the room. Prepared paper, wetted, wrinkled, dried, unfolded, spray painted, desert colored patterns. At 91, Fred Lee Berensmeier passed at his Lagunitas home, surrounded by his beloved artwork and family on January 29, 2024. Lee was the son of Fred Carl Berensmeier and Wilhelmina Westheimer. His first 7 years were spent on the East Coast, where he enjoyed playing in the open fields and mountainous areas of the upper state of New York. Moving to Florida, he remembers catching land crabs with the local boys with a special tool his mechanic father gave him to extract crabs from their lairs. Fred Sr. provided Lee with brushes, an easel, and paints when he was 3. You'll recognize this. One morning, his white t-shirt was streaked with beautiful colors. Lee said, "Look, I'm a rainbow." Lee was the best at drawing in each grade, so he knew he wanted to be an artist very early on. He was always asked to design the school posters. Moving to San Francisco in the late 30s, his dad regularly drove him through the San Geronimo Valley on their way to Dillon Beach. They often brought a rabbit home for dinner, as both were, as Grandpa said, marksmen. Lee went to Mission High School, then San Francisco State, where he met his future wife, Jean, and competed in track and field. He did the high jump and the high hurdles. Lee also competed with Jean on test scores, the winner having to buy dinner. Lee and Jean loved to go on nature adventures with his dad, Fred Sr., who later became Santa Claus at this wonderful San Geronimo Valley Christmas Art Festival. And he did that for 16 years. At San Francisco State, a San Francisco State assignment led Lee to become the first Berensmeier to work in the San Geronimo Valley at Forest Farm Summer Camp. He sent drawings of the valley to his sweetheart Jean, and soon they worked together, falling in love with the valley in 1952. They rode the ridges on horseback. He was the horse wrangler, and dreamed of living there. Lee married Jean in 1956. He earned a master's degree in art and became head of the Fine Arts Printmaking Department and art instructor at City College of San Francisco. And I'm very proud to say the person who hired him is in attendance. Thanks for being here, Richard. In 1958, he was drafted and served in the Korean War, where he became a true marksman and competed on the sharpshooters team at his military base at Fort Ord. He once amazed Jean by shooting a bird right through the eye from quite a distance. He played on the Army softball team and used his speed, playing in short right field in order to take hits away, yet still being able to sprint back and catch the long ones. After the service, in 1961, Lee and Jean spent 9 months traveling on a Vespa throughout Europe. A highlight was the 17,000-year-old Lascaux cave paintings. Lee became, and back then they could see the original ones, as many of you probably know. Lee became a father in 1962 when Paul was born. Wanting to raise their son in the country, they bought a house in Lagunitas, 1963, on the slopes of Mount Barnaby, where they lived the rest of their lives. A well-known artist, Lee was an annual participant in the Spring Art Show from its inception. By the 60s, he was creating holograph images by printing flattened-out objects such as metal war toys, tin cans, and other artifacts, along with his etchings, seriographs, linocuts, and drawings. In 1981, he took a year sabbatical and studied petroglyphs. He discovered a rare solar lunar calendar petroglyph atop Fajada Butte in Chaco Canyon. His artwork includes images from his personal experiences with the natural environment, studies of Native American philosophies, and petroglyphs and pictographs of the American Southwest. Lee's work has been exhibited at Tokyo Metropolitan Museum, Brandt's Clé de Fabrique Museum in Denmark, Yerba Buena Center, and De Young Museum in San Francisco. One of his pieces was accepted in the Smithsonian's permanent art collection. His holograph, Coyote and White Man Looking for Bent Heart, was awarded to the Library of Congress Permanent Collection. Discovering children were not getting outside enough, Lee co-founded Wilderness Way with Jean and Paul in 1999, a family-run nonprofit environmental education center in the Valley. Lee has always been Wilderness Way's go-to guide for native crafts and art projects. A strong, quiet family man, Lee had a soft, supportive presence, never seeking the limelight, because what he did was not for himself, it was for others. He was always there, whether it be an exciting family event, community project, or political meeting to help preserve his beloved valley. He was a great mentor and role model to Paul and Tina. He was a proud spouse, with Jean for 67 years and a proud father to Paul for 61 years. Lee will be best remembered for his wonderful smile, consistent encouragement of artists, tireless dedication to his artwork, and lighting up the community center with amazing colors and images on countless occasions. And we're doing it once more, Lee. He always encouraged artists to be their best and had a unique ability to turn their mistakes into key parts of their art by suggesting they alternate their work creatively into a positive aspect. He would say, there really are no mistakes in art. Lee loved being outdoors, hiking, gardening, and supporting the valley. He was proud not to have missed any of Paul's Little League baseball games or college decathlons, often filming them. When Paul learned to pitch, Lee was his catcher, and the two often invented deceptive pitches together. And I'm still throwing those today. Lee, some of my baseball players are here too. Thanks, guys. Lee loved Native American flute music. Paul's Coco Polly Calling CD was Lee's favorite, and it often could be heard echoing through the studio as he worked on his beloved images. A great artist, teacher, visionary, husband, and father, Lee is survived by his sister Margot, son Paul, daughter-in-law Tina, and nephew Shad. As Grandpa Santa Berensmeier said, Lee lived the life to the fullest. May we hear him in the babbling brooks, remember him through his magnificent imagery, and see his spirit dancing in the wind, colors and light as they caress the golden rolling hills of his beloved San Geronimo Valley. When Lee was not teaching art, he spent a lot of time doing his own artwork in the San Geronimo Valley. So I think it would be most appropriate to hear from some of Lee's art peers from our valley here. First, I would like to invite Larry Rippey. Larry is our San Geronimo Valley Community Center's visual arts coordinator. Together, Lee and Larry have hung some pretty amazing art shows here over the years.
I've been here on staff at the center for many years. One of my primary duties has been serving as visual arts coordinator. The center has a long history of supporting and nurturing the arts in the valley. The fact of the matter is the center, as originally founded by Jean Berensmeier, was known as the Arts Center. I suspect a lot of you old-timers here know about that. But, we've tried to carry on the spirit by hosting monthly art exhibits here and group shows, including the annual Spring Art Show. Fred was a major part of the center's annual Spring Art Show from its very beginnings, which predates our official counting of 34 years, certainly predates me. Over the years, I had the opportunity, and I'll say the honor, of working with Fred Berensmeier. That's been the case both in group shows, along with a handful of solo exhibits by Fred, and the years and years of the Spring Art Show. Fred was a master printmaker. He was equally adept at linotypes, serigraphs, etchings, and collagraphs, and often combining the different printmaking approaches. And he seemed to be completely comfortable bending a lot of ostensible rules of printmaking along the way. I think Paul talked about that quite a bit. Fortunately for us, Fred was also a natural-born teacher. He had a long career as head of the printmaking department at City College in San Francisco for many years. And he was also a co-founder of Wilderness Way, as you already heard. The teacher came out almost every time Fred exhibited his work at the center. During shows here, such as his Gifting My Legacy solo exhibit, which you may have seen here, and other shows, Fred would conduct tutorials on printmaking and his unusual and often unique techniques. I've tried my hand at printmaking, and I have to say I was always in awe of Fred's work. I was walking through the rooms here last night looking at his work and wondering how did he achieve some of these techniques. I had never previously seen those charcoal drawings that are displayed in the next room. They feel pretty mysterious to me, like some deep personal internal dialogue. And it's not just a matter of technique. Beyond that technique, or below the surface of those techniques, there's also spirit. I think Fred was one of the most respected artists in the Valley, and one of the people who probably helped establish the Valley as a place for the arts. And for me, perhaps more than anyone, the iconic figure that best represented the creative arts community. One thing I always noticed and always appreciated was the intensity of focus Fred would give to the work of others. I found Fred to be a soft-spoken gentleman who was always supportive of artists and their creative endeavors. I recall on occasion seeing Fred at the gallery standing in front of a piece and studying it and really taking his time with it. And I took that as a lesson, a reminder to really pay attention. And I hope that when you wander around these rooms that you'll take a long and careful look at Fred Berensmeier's work. Whenever I was organizing shows, whether it was the annual printmaking show or the senior lunch group show or whatever it was, I would always try to get something of Fred's into the show. And I'm going to miss not being able to do that in the future.
Well, we'll have to work on that later.
The Valley is blessed to have a number of artists living here who, like Lee, have been producing wonderful works of art for many decades. For our next speaker, I'd like to invite one of these Valley artists that go way back with Lee, Jeff Bernstein.
I'm a longtime Valley resident and fellow artist and old friend of Lee's and the Berensmeier family. It is very meaningful to be here and honor my friend today. Lee was a special person, a gentle teacher, and an extraordinary artist. He was a quiet man with a very kind and generous spirit. Lee's art has always been exceptional in subject matter, expression, and technique, particularly his art inspired by the Native American culture and mysticism, a profound message in every piece. For decades, Lee and his wife Jean were very instrumental in developing the San Geronimo Valley community, and we know, and in the community that we know and enjoy today. Lee will be remembered in his presence and vision greatly moved. Thank you.
Our Valley is blessed to have an absolutely amazing community center here. It has been a huge part of my family, as my mom, Jean, was one of the key individuals who saved this building from being demolished in the 60s. Then Jean worked hard over many years on building it up as a community center for everyone to enjoy. Lee has brightened the interior of this historic building with his art pieces countless times. This is a nice segue to invite our first community center executive director, Dave Court, to speak. After Jean hired him in 1991, Dave put his heart and spirit into the community center's evolution for 32 years, making it largely what it is today. Dave, I still remember building those art podiums in the Valley Room right here with my dad and Richard Sloan, who's here, the very day you first walked into the community center. Boy, am I glad Richard was able to get an application into your hand.
You know, when you just walk through this room and the other room and the video out there and the photos, it just really speaks for itself that Lee's life, what it was all about. You know, it's just, I think I first met Lee in 1978 when Howie and I moved here from Chicago, and just the first minute I met him, I just knew, God, this is really one special guy. And the relationship between Lee and Jean was just one of the most beautiful relationships that, you know, I've ever experienced in my life. And, you know, these walls and I especially love that photo from Forest Farm Camp where Jean and Lee are counselors there. And just seeing them, in their, what were they called, their early 20s, in that.
Yeah.
Lee's laying on top of the van, it just, when I saw that here the other day, I just really broke into tears, and just that emotion of the love story that they had together for such a long period of time, right here in this valley. And, Lee, Howie and I are very fortunate. We just live 2 or 3 doors, from the Berensmeyers, and Lee was just always such an inspiration to me. He was so creative. He was out in his garden, and during his very healthy years, he would walk to Barnaby every day, and he set a pretty high bar. I tried to do it, but I never came close. And then, the Berensmeyers, if you go to the bottom of their driveway, just go up about football field. It's like the steepest climb. And Lee used to go up and down that like 5 or 6 times a day. The guy really kept himself in shape. And, one trip for me, I'm like wiped out. And so he was a real mentor to me and inspiration. Every day I saw Lee, I just loved the guy. And so thank you, Paul, and Tina for having his memorial here. It was in the spring of '91, there was this ad in the Point Reyes Light that this center director job was open. It was 13 hours a week, and it was $600 a month. And Howie made me apply for it. And our rent was only $500, so I said, well, I couldn't argue with her. And so that was like that day. So I came in to get the application, and then Richard, Paul, and Lee were standing right here. They're building those art boxes that are in the other room. And it was just great. I'd known Lee a little bit, and I'd watched Paul play some baseball. Knew Richard from my work in the probation department. And it just, like, that day just really changed my life. And just that, 3 of the men I just loved the most were part of that. And Lee and Gene told me that story in pretty detail about their trip on the Vespa throughout Europe. What year was that, Paul?
1961.
61. And the part that Lee told me about that really stayed with me was, I think near the end of their trip, they were in maybe between Spain and France or something, and they're like riding this Vespa, and this huge snowstorm happened. And he just told me, and I just had this picture of these 2 young 20-year-olds. I mean, those Vespas are not that big, Like, I never figured out, like, where did they have the backpack, where did they keep their stuff? But I just still have this vision of this young Lee and Gene, going, maybe it was the Alps, and this massive snowstorm and blizzard hits, and they're just out there. And, when they shared that story with me, it's really stayed with me for, close to 40 years. The other story I wanted to share, and it's maybe too much, but I hope it's okay with Paul. One night, it was my 3rd or 4th year here, and we would have the Holly Art Fair, and those first years they would be 3 days, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and it was a lot of work. I mean, it was like. And again, I was still getting paid for like 13 hours a week, $600 a month, and I've been there for like 60 hours in a row. It's Sunday night around 7 o'clock, and but you just I just was determined I wasn't going to let Gene outwork me, which is impossible. You can't outwork Gene. Even today, you can't outwork Gene. So the last 2 of us left were me and Gene. And we put all the chairs and tables away, we locked everything up. It was probably like 7:30 or 8. And then in the kitchen, the last thing we were cleaning the kitchen, and there was a little bit of food left. And Gene and I each made ourselves a turkey sandwich. And so we're making these sandwiches, and so just as we're going home, and Jean had this smile on her face, and she said, yeah, and she made 2 sandwiches. She goes, I made one for Lee, one for me. And she said, we're gonna go home and have these turkey sandwiches. And then she winked at me and she said, and who knows what might happen after that. And I was just like, whoa. Now, Jean was probably like, is that okay, Paul? And again, I was probably like my late 30s. Jean was like probably about my age now. Hey, wow. Yeah, have a great time, Jean. I'll never forget that. That just blew me away, especially when she winked at me. So yeah, I never found out exactly what happened. It sounded like it was going to be pretty good. And,
when I think of Lee, I like to think of the times that we spent working on things. What a lot of folks may not know is, besides being a fantastic artist, he did a lot of other projects. And I was very fortunate and feel very lucky that I would get called and he would say, come on, we're going to go do this. And we would. And the first thing we did was at the very first community center or art center Christmas festival, the very first one, Lee made a giant 4x8 plywood sign, and we erected it on White's Hill. So when you drove up White's Hill, you saw the hill up in front of you, and there was a giant sign inviting you to come to the Christmas fair. I don't know, well, there's enough old folks here that probably know what a Berensmeier sign is. The advertising that used to put one word and string them out down a whole several blocks of signs. Well, Lee made a series of Berensmeier signs, one word, and at the next Christmas fair, he called me and we went down and we put them on all the fences through Flanders Field. All the way down was a sign inviting you to come to the Christmas fair. The reason I said that I felt so fortunate in getting invited to help him do these things was why it was so much fun to work with Lee. He was probably, well, maybe the only person I've ever worked with on quite a few projects, I'll mention a couple more, who never had anything negative to say about anybody. He was the most generous, the calmest, quietest, and thoroughly, I'm having trouble with the words for it, because he was so much there in such a positive and generous, or maybe positive is the best word, a person to spend time with. I can't imagine anybody that I would have wanted to spend more time with. We worked long hours on a few projects, and it was that presence was constant the whole time. Some of the other things we did were around the Christmas fair. You may remember those giant reindeer that were 8 feet tall. There were 2 of them that we put up on telephone poles. So there was the huge sign to start with, there was the Berensmeier signs, there were the posters, and I'll get to that in a minute, and the giant 8 feet tall reindeer.
yeah, we still have those, Richard.
Dynamite. they're wiggly and they're hard to manage, and we put them up on telephone poles, and that was no mean feat. But Lee was always positive about it. It was never a problem, which is really amazing. But the longest time we spent together was printing posters, silk screening posters. The one for the art fair was two-color, red and black. The one for No Blood for Oil was two-color, red and black. But when you do a two-color silk screen, you do the first color and then you have to let it dry before you do the second color. And so all through the studio were lines and clothespins, and I can still see all these posters hanging filling the entire room with posters everywhere. And we did the reindeer poster, but then my favorite was the No Blood for Oil poster that he drew. It's really a dramatic poster, and we silk screened those in the hundreds, and Tim Milos and I managed to get a lot of them up all over Marin County. They were a really dynamite poster. There's a whole series of projects that I worked on with Lee, but I believe it's fair to say they were all profitable, outstanding, and they certainly contributed to my feeling good about what it was we were doing and contributing to the community and being part of it.
So the Berensmeier family has been blessed indeed. Jean and Lee were together for 74 years. I had the great good fortune to be with them for over 60 years. Over the last 25 years, I have been blessed to share my life with another very special family member. For our last speaker, I would like to invite my wife, Tina, to share a few words about Lee.
Hi, everyone. Paul has shared so much of his love for Lee with you already today. He's so proud to have had a father who not only was always there as a mentor and guiding him through life, also that they had such a good time together. And I'd like to share a couple of stories with you. So Lee came into my life through his art, which also coincided with a fortunate reunion with Paul. Right here at the center, I was driving through the valley on my way to a sweat lodge in Samuel P. Taylor Park, when they used to do that out there, when I saw the familiar reindeer sign that Richard just spoke of, that Lee designed, announcing the Christmas Art Festival. At that time, it had gone from a 3-day event to a 2-day affair, which I thought was wonderful. I walked into the center, actually into the West Room, to the sound of a piano-flute duet. And I glanced over my shoulder, and yes, you guessed it, Paul was the one playing the flute. My heart skipped a beat. And I quickly turned around to hide my blushing cheeks. And I came face to face with Lee's interspecies flying lessons, which is the insert on the black and white one hanging up by the door there.
Yeah.
And it was on a podium that Lee had built with Richard Sloan. Wow. Not only was I captivated by the lino cut print, an aerial man, a flying turtle, dancing ravens, ocean waves, clouds, and spirit rock, but also by the fluttering of my heart. You see, Paul and I had been good friends in San Mateo, but Paul came back to the valley without giving me his contact information. There were no cell phones back then.
You just had a cell phone, right?
So, anyway, Paul came over, and as we about the artist because I loved the print. And he replied, as a matter of fact, I know him very well. Would you like to visit his studio? Pretty good line, Paul. Yes, I did visit the studio. Yes, I bought the print. And the rest is history with Paul and I. We were married at his parents' home in 2004. And Dave and Howie cooked up salmon for us. And we had a wonderful, wonderful wedding there in the backyard. Lee and I planted petunias the morning of, because if we had put them out the night before, the deer would have eaten them. And Paul and I have our 20th anniversary at the end of this month. So I have to thank Lee for bringing us back together again. It was great that the fair was over 2 days, because I could return the following day after my sweat lodge, see the studio, and pick up my art piece from the center. A couple of things about Wilderness Way. So Lee was the creative aspect of Wilderness Way. Jean, as you know, was the backbone. Paul was the classroom and the outdoors teacher. And for a few years, I was the field trip van driver and shepherded the back of the pack children while Paul ran ahead, leading enthusiastic students on time-limited electives such as secret salmon sites throughout the Valley watershed. There were times when the energy to get outdoors with the young ones was so strong, I'd stop the van, and before I could put the handbrake on, the doors were flying open and the students were off running, leaving me scrambling to lock up and catch up. So being the sweep position was not easy. It's a good job Paul and I met running, or I would never have caught up. When Jean had her heart surgery, Lee would prepare art projects, and Paul and I would do some teaching together. And under the watchful eye of Sally Hutchinson with her 7th and 8th graders, we managed to co-teach with her the steelhead in the classroom program, which was really wonderful. It was raising fish in the classroom. Jean did her wishing poles with all grades of children, and Lee made sure that the fish were age appropriate. He also designed the salmon crossing signs that you see in Samuel P. Taylor Park and in Fairfax. And there's an example of a fishmobile in the room next door. He designed the math project, which was the fish mural on the Wilderness Way wall. And designed spiral poetry, and encouraged unusual fish scale patterns on some fish cutouts that you can see in the next room also. So Lee provided a lot of the materials and tools for Wilderness Way, including for the watershed model that created the rolling hills of the valley. And then film. So you can see Lee's artwork in here, but he also did a lot of filming with Paul and I. So Lee appeared to some people to be in the background at Wilderness Way. That was partly due to his life-changing heart attack that happened shortly into his retirement. That affected his endurance and, of course, his desire to have a calmer life. It did not change his creativity. He remained a prolific artist in different ways. A lifelong photographer, Lee loved video camera as well. As a family, we would film and edit environmental-based films for Wilderness Way that we shared with children, parents, and teachers. Lee, Paul, and I would all bundle up on cold, frosty mornings that gave way to beautiful morning light, looking for a chance to film maybe a bobcat, a coyote, or whatever happened to be moving out there. We went out frequently together, rain or shine, all seasons, up by the old tree snags to film the turkey vultures spreading their wings out to dry, or hiking up Devil's Gulch to film the spawning salmon. Jean loved to travel. Now, Paul and Jean would often go on trips together, and boy, did they have a lot of fun. Sometimes I was a bit envious of their exciting adventures, like going to Idaho to see the eclipse, or going to Washington and then doing a cross-country road trip all the way back, or maybe going to Maui together. But you know what? I got to have dinners after work with Lee, and then we'd spend the evenings together doing artwork. By this time, Lee had well perfected his multi-layered prepared paper technique for the base background of his prints and drawings. Lee also taught me during that time how to carve a lino cut. My first creation, Butterfly Dreams, actually sold here at the center. I was so pleased when he gifted me a set of tools to gouge the lino out with one Christmas. Another thing Lee loved was his garden. He would plant something every year, including when he was 90 years old. Paul and our good friend Juan and Marta would do the heavy work. They would turn the beds over, do the weeding. I'd help, but Lee would also write a list of what he wanted from the nursery, and I'd go shopping, and then Lee and I would plant together. Lee and Paul grew tobacco one year that was over 6 feet tall, which is unusual. Lee was very proud of his yield of tomatoes, green beans, lettuce, kale, pears, apples, plums, persimmons. Now last year was a year of the gopher. And as they would take the plants from under the ground, we thought we would have diminishing returns. And Lee said we had to rescue the remaining uneaten plants. So that meant that Paul and I went out to the garden, we dug up the tomatoes and replanted them in huge pots. And Paul stacked the pots on top of bricks so they were way high up off the soil. And guess what? We had a crop. Lee's 9th decade. Lee continued to adapt his artwork to his energy level by coloring back into his beloved prepared paper to bring out images and caricatures that were hidden in the shadows. What fun things emerged out of the background. So as he came to his last year of life after Jean passed, we had a lot of help from many people here in the valley. So one of them was West Marin Senior Services. So I'd like to give them a shout out because they provide a lot of support for elders here. So Laura Sherman and Chloe Cook, who partner with nursing schools to provide hands-on experience for student nurses to have a real in-person home visit with elders in our community as part of their public health curriculum now happens here in the valley. So that's an amazing, wonderful thing. And one of Lee's highlights was their weekly visit during his hospice care at home. I'm a retired nurse, so we would quickly complete the student assignment for the visit so that they could then have something more meaningful with Lee. Well, what was important to Lee? His artwork. So they would sit at the table and they'd talk about the art on the walls, or sometimes they'd participate in coloring a piece of Lee's prepared paper together. During this time, Lee literally lit up. His eyes would brighten and he beamed smiles as the students asked him for advice. An art educator right up to his last days.
So I just want to say about Freddie. He is a really special man. So I really love him. He's great. I know he is the greatest valley artist of all time. So I really love him. So I want to say thank you for the Berensmeier for hosting it on. Fred, I really missed you. I hope you be missed. I love you, Lee. Thank you.
So for me, Lee and Fred, I I saw him for a few seconds, here and there, over the years. But what he gave to Tina and to Paul, and I listened to you, you guys are a composite of your mom and pop, you know, what he gave to you. And I'm so proud to be a part of this gig to where I get to hear about you today. And I don't miss your mom and pop, like they're so here, you know, because I was here, you know, I'm here setting up the chairs and I spend a moment, I don't know how to look at art, but then, you know, Tina talked about it, you know, I want it. I can't imagine how you do some of these things. And so it's been a great day for me. And I have these parts of me when we have these celebrations of people's lives and we go to them. I like to try to take some of these people with me. For the rest, it's what, 3:30. So the rest of the day, I'm going to have, you know, Gene with me, you guys, Tina, Paul, talking, and Lee, and just have, you know, just, I'll put them right here, one in my pocket, here, and just what would they think of my day? And there's this quote, I don't know who wrote it, but it says, the proper value and respect for time determines success or failure in all your endeavors. And the first thing you talked about was time, and a taskmaster that your dad was. When you talk about time, you mentioned it about 4 times. And I just feel like they honored time. You honored your moments here on the planet. They're not guaranteed, you know, tomorrow. And I know I don't know well enough to sing a song, but I'm going to sing this song. Because, well, one I sang to Gene, but I sang on the phone a few times to you guys. But I don't get this song. It don't make sense to me. And the words don't make sense, but it's about, it says the good life. And some of you guys have heard this song before. Xander. and I don't know the meaning of it or who wrote it, but I'm going to have a great rest of the day because of this moment here with you all, because of this community center, because of the people that they inspire me, and I'm here. Not many of these faces I look at, and that happens for me. Just seeing you, the way you talk about your father. So here's this song. Oh, the good life for fun seems to be the ideal. The good life lets you hide all the sadness you feel. You won't really fall in love. You can't take the chance. So please be honest with yourself. Don't try and fake romance. It's the good life to be free and explore the unknown. Like the heartaches, when you learn, you must face them alone. Please remember, I still want you. And in case you wonder why, well, just wake up. Gene Lee, don't kiss the good life goodbye.
I really didn't know Lee that well, and you had a conversation with him. I always saw his presence. I always knew he was there. In that, seeing him and knowing him, I got truly what Paul said, and strong, silent, supportive, always there for you when you need him. And I helped set up the show on Tuesday, and in between, this is too high, that's too low, and kind of stuff. I was hanging some of the prints in the other room. As I was doing it, his face and a lot of images there grass caught me, and it reached out, and it really connected with the expressions on the face in those prints. So as you walk around and look at the artwork, I hope you can feel that sensibly and get to know him in a new way like I did just last Tuesday. So, thank you.
I moved out to the valley in 1973, just down the hill a little bit from the Berensmeier household. Didn't spend a lot of time up there. I learned really quickly that it was a place to avoid. That if I went there, Jean would enroll me in some crusade of hers. It's like, I've got a job, I've got 2 kids, one of them's negative, high energy, and here's this woman of boundless energy who's going to, railroad me into 20, 30, 40 hours of some crusade that it has to be done right now. I mostly encountered Lee on the fire road up to Barnaby. At that time I was running in marathons and ultra marathons, and he was walking up and down and up and down. It's hard to go up there when he wasn't doing it on that road. And a lot of really great conversations. And I enjoyed that. It was this kind of thing of, I hope Lee's out hiking, or God, I hope Lee isn't hiking because I've really got to train for this next race. For some of that. But over the years, we've got we all know what gaydar is. I've developed a sort of tough old buzzard bar kind of thing. And Lee was a tough old buzzard. What you might not know about is the big heart attack that he had was that he got it going up Barnaby, and he crawled down the hill on all 4. He crawled down the hill. There were no cell phones then, none of that stuff. Crawled down the hill, got to the house, made the 911 call. He was a tough guy. And, I miss him. I do.
I'm Karen Vodes, and I have a memory. It's not my memory, it's my mother's memory, Judy Vodes. And so she used to tell me stories about how they ended up here in the valley, my mom and my dad. And my mom was a camper at Forest Farm Camps in the 40s, I guess. And she tells the stories of the Wrangler, who was Lee Berensmeier, and Jean, who was a counselor. So my mom was a camper, and they were counselors. And it's just a simple memory that she always shared. But they had an old flatbed truck, and Lee and all the counselors would gather up the campers, and they all get into the flatbed truck, and Lee would drive, and they would all drive down every day down to the creek at Taylor Park and swim for the day. And it was one of her favorite memories of being a kid out here, and that's how my family ended up here, because she remembered the valley and how special it was. So I just thought I'd share that for my mom.
Hi everyone, I'm Raphael. I might be the last person in this room to have met Lee. I moved to the valley 2 years ago, just up the street from the Berensmeier house, way up the hill. And I grew up in San Francisco, lived in Oakland, and made this wild decision to move to the valley. And yeah, I just remember the first time I saw Lee, I really like running up and down the hill, and I was on the run, and I remember looking over, and they have this deck, and Lee's sitting on this little stool, and he's got his little bag, and he's got this hammer and his hat, and he's hammering this nail in slow motion. He's really trying, but he's not doing anything. He's just sort of like, and I just remember looking up and I was like, wow, that guy's so old. and interesting. There's just something magnetic about him. And so I sort of started trying to sort of pry my way into this interesting house. And it took me a long time to get to him because Gene was always in front. So beautiful and loud and strong. And Lee would just sort of be smiling in the back. Word man, a few words. But I really had a beautiful, beautiful privilege and expansive couple of months with Lee. Got to spend, got into this routine of coming over on Sundays and drawing. And Lee gifted me one of his handmade pieces of paper. And we were kind of different than this. We were looking for letting the paper reveal what was there. And so we were creating shapes and building from these amazing crinkles that he made and organic shapes. And I worked on this one piece for like 4 months, 3-4 months. And it's just beautiful. It's really beautiful. And getting to go and tour his studio and see this work was right around the time that I was realizing the hole in my life of connection to nature and growing up in the city and seeing in his work, he's really looking, he's really seeing, he's really being with nature. Just especially with like the ravens and the crows, just climbing Barnaby and seeing them and thinking of him and thinking of the way that he's looking at them and seeing Spirit Rock and the way that he depicts it in such a beautiful space, sacred space. I felt really lucky, just as I was realizing I had all these animist urges, I met this guy who was so deep in it and such an inspiring looker. And I just will always cherish those times I got to spend with him and all you, Tina and Paul too. And thank you.
He was always there. He sat there opposite Jean, next to me, listening, encouraging, giving advice, support. He was the wind beneath our wings. He is the reason we are here, choosing to be horse wrangler at Forest Farm Camp in 1951. Talented artist, sending sketches, golden rolling hills, valley ridges, to Jean. He helped with everything. Jean needing a good ear, intricacies of defeating the 61 master plan. Paul needing a good catcher, a good coach. He was always there. First thing we would do after big moments, sit together, tell our story, really listen. The greatest times in our lives, shared, respected, honored. He kept out of the limelight, doing art, lending support. He worked in the studio listening to Native American flute music. I was so proud to make him a flute CD he loved. Native sounds echoing through the studio. He was always there, through thick and thin, enabling us to be our best, giving our greatest gifts, saving the community center building, saving the valley from the 61 master plan, 5,000 homes, 20,000 people, saving the ridges, purchasing Roy's Redwoods, the Gary Giacomini open space, creating Wilderness Way, artwork that filled the community center, Wilderness Way's giant fish mural. And a few that have come from afar, if you haven't seen that, You'll have to just go across the road there and see the Wilderness Way building and the wonderful mural there. He did it for all of us to be included, to share beautiful images together of love, of life, of home. He filmed our greatest moments. Lee and I would sit together, side by side, edit films, Wilderness Way projects, rafting the Grand Canyon with Grandpa, beating the All-Star team, winning the Decathlon Conference Championship, interviews, environmental awards, acceptance speeches. He was always there in his quiet way, a step back, strong, encouraging, supporting, advising, listening, our foundation. He shined through his art, Wilderness Way's go-to guy. Fine art pencils, brushes, paints, tools, flutes, fish cutouts for wishing poles. You might see a few fish in the other room there. Salmon crossing signs. He always figured a way, together, as a family, happily, lovingly. Yes, he was always there, husband, father, artist, in love, in light. Old man image maker. Now he is on the other side. Yet there is his love, there is his light here. It permeates me, it blankets the valley. See his light upon the golden rolling hills. Feel his love here in your heart as you pass through this special valley he loved so dearly. My dad loved to do his artwork to the sound of Native American flute music. I play the Native American flute, and one Christmas I made him a special artwork CD. He loved it. I was so proud to come over and hear that soft music echoing through the house and studio as he did his artwork. Lee made me a native flute, so I thought it would be most appropriate to end by playing a special song on the flute he made in honor of Lee. It is a song that came to me on Mount Barnaby, overlooking the San Geronimo Valley. Lee was nearing the last days when I went up the mountain to play this flute for him. Suddenly a song came to me and I played it atop the mountain. When I returned home, Tina told me an interesting story. Lee was dozing off at the table, but his hands were active. He was moving his arms, and he said he was doing a carving, making the notches on the flute. So to me that was very interesting because the flute I brought up the mountain had many notches in it. Shortly after, Lee said, "That was a good one, Paul." Tina said, "What was good?" Lee responded, "Paul played a song, and it was a good one." Tina realized that somehow Lee's spirit heard that flute song. So I would like to play that again for Lee's spirit, wherever it is, and pray that he is in a good place and might even be able to do a bit more artwork up there too. I have come to call this piece Traveling Song. May these notes carry our love up and out to Lee.